So at a very young age, you dropped out of high school and went to work.
That's right.
Putting the ad in and going, you'll do whatever it takes.
Yeah. So I actually just started adopting the word that I have faith. I have faith that I can do this. And I just started to do it. And I didn't realize I was doing a Bible verse at the time.
Figure out what you love doing and then go figure out how to make money at it.
Rightly. Everybody has the ability to have full self-expression, all for the glory of God, all for the glory of free enterprise. And they can achieve anything they want. There's no capping anybody.
Hello, and welcome to Clear Conversations, the Entrepreneurial Legacy Series. I'm your host, John Sleeting, and today I'm joined by Tim Lynn. Tim is the founder of a company that is turning 45 years old, NIR. He has got a fantastic life experience that goes from, on one end, dropping out of high school and starting a family, into the other end of the spectrum of just achieving success in this world's eyes, but more importantly for Tim, success in God's eyes, in what he's trying to live out every day of his life. Doesn't mean it's easy. There's fearful moments that come into play. There's challenges that come through business and family. But the way Tim reflects on his book that he's captured, and we'll talk a little bit about that, regarding his faith, his self and what it means for self-care, how he approaches then family and thinks about his life's work and packages that up together. You are in for a real treat of a conversation with Timothy Lynn, and I look forward to diving in and getting started. Thank you again, Tim, for joining me in this conversation today. Really looking forward to just exploring the wide array of your career, your perspectives, your legacy, right? So let's actually start right there. When you think about this concept of legacy coming into today's conversation, what does that word mean to you? How do you define it? How do you think about what that means for Tim Lynn?
Yeah, thank you for having me, John. I appreciate it, and I look forward to our conversations today. Legacy to me really starts with my Creator. It starts with Jesus Christ, and then it goes to me as a child of God, and then from there I move out into the world. So I realize what I'm trying to do each day, if I'm serving the Lord correctly, even though I know I'm a sinner and a broken man, I'm starting my legacy there.
Yeah.
So it's kind of exciting to take it from the root, if you will, and didn't just follow it down the line, knowing that it'll advance, through the people I deal with, through my company, through my family, through my children and my grandchildren.
Yeah.
So eventually it all winds up piled up somewhere way down into the future. But I'm the guy really starting it. I'm the guy that God put on earth, and He's got a purpose for me, and I'm supposed to be doing something.
Yeah, every day. When you mention your company, coming on 45-year anniversary, congratulations with
Thank you.
The business, the longevity of 45 years, starting and running the company. First, so listeners have a little bit of a perspective. Share a little bit about, what is the company? What is the business that you're in?
Yeah, I own NIR Roof Care Inc. We're a commercial service company. I pioneered service agreements actually in the commercial roofing industry about 35 years ago.
Okay.
So we have a nice reoccurring revenue business model. I used to be real large in big new construction and things like that. And then we just created this service model that I think actually God brought to me. Okay. And we organize everything around that service model, and that's what we've been doing.
Okay. Well, you have some great stories that we will unpack too, over 45 years of starting and running the business. So that's the business background. So you're coming at this from an entrepreneur. You talk about serving and how your faith interjects in serving. So let's go back to Tim Lynn as a child, right? Share a little bit about your family, your upbringing. Was it a business family? Go ahead and share a little bit so people get to know you on the personal level too.
So like you say, as my mom was, talking to my dad and always trying to figure out what the deal was. Now, my dad was a math professor and science professor at Notre Dame. So my mom would ask him math questions, like if we buy this piece of real estate for $2 million, what's the payment going to be at 6% interest? And the amazing thing is he would tell her the payment.
Yeah.
So we heard those math calculations. So he was really big on the math calculations, and she was big on the structure.
Okay.
And so we heard that. And I think what I realized and gained as I watched this over the years as a little guy she actually started to call me her little tycoon. So I remember that to this day, that she would say, Timmy, you're my little tycoon. And I started wearing suits, 3-piece suits at 16 years old. Seriously, I had a pocket watch and I had a briefcase and I was ready to do business.
And you had quite a few siblings in the mix too?
Yeah, we had 9 children.
Yeah.
5 boys and 3 girls.
And even when you get together now, business is in the family, right?
Absolutely.
A lot of different
Real
ways.
estate and roofing are the 2 main, and one of them is in the resale business as well. So
Okay.
yeah.
Well, you mentioned at 16 years old, wearing a suit, but life took a dramatic turn for you also at 16 years old. And a lot of people would step back and look at that and say, wow, how do you get to where you're at today, given, a little bit of you share your story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I learned about abortion when I was 15 years old because my girlfriend was pregnant, and she called me one day and said, I'm pregnant, and what do we do? And I went to my mother and I said, what do you think, Mom? And she said, Timmy, you got to decide what you do. And I think that God was with me at that time, and I simply called her back and said, we've got to get married and have our baby. It's very straightforward to me. Her mother said to me, we don't want you to see our daughter again. And I said, well, can I just talk to her one more time? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, we're going to have to run away until you're 9 months pregnant so we can have our baby. So we did that, and we went to Chicago, lived at my brother's house, my sister's house, and we called her parents every day. And so here I am negotiating at 16, 15 years old, the life of my child.
Yeah.
And today our son is 52 years old, Tim Jr. And so we had the baby then, and like I say, and we got married before he was born.
Right. And so at a very young age, you dropped out of high school and went to work.
That's right.
Putting the ad in and going, you'll do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
So through that, there's so many lessons to be learned, right? The life lessons that come out of that, the faith and the dependency, and then the work ethic. And when you look back at that time, how do you classify, like, here are the major life lessons that you'd want to encourage other listeners at young ages when you feel like you've got a setback in life? Because that's the way a lot of people look at it, right? At one hand, it's like you celebrate the new life.
Yeah.
On the other hand, a lot of people would be like, yeah, but you're dropping out of high school. How do you got to go to work? How do you approach that? What encouragement or instruction would you share with others?
Yeah, I think one of the great influence was my mother along the way saying, to have faith and always keep trying. So I didn't know that there was a Bible verse that said faith without deeds, faith is dead. So I actually just started adopting the word that I have faith. I have faith that I can do this. And I just started to do it. And I didn't realize I was doing a Bible verse at the time. I was just putting my faith into action. So I didn't know faith into action was a Bible verse. So I knew that I better be moving my feet. Yeah. I better be having faith, and I better just keep optimistic. So I don't know too many negative words. I don't have a vocabulary like that. It's I'm going to move forward, and I'm going to be positive, and I'm going to try and pick myself back up. And boy, I had to pick myself up a lot of times.
You did a wide array of odd jobs and different activities, just trying to earn an income and keep food on the table, literally. But we also mentioned 45 years your company now has been in place. So how old were you when you founded NIR?
Yeah, I was 25 when I founded NIR.
Okay.
And before that, I was in actually the residential business for about 7 years, from like 17 to 24.
Okay.
So when I think back of all those years in the residential business, between 17 and 24, I was installing roofs on 5 houses a day, literally a semi-load of shingles a day. I had people running when I was 16, 17, 18 years old. Okay. I think I was probably losing money on every single one of those jobs because I didn't understand how to calculate workman's comp or insurance and these things. But I was doing a good job and doing them right and getting them done.
Yeah.
So it was great.
And so what prompted you then to start NIR at age of 25?
Yeah, so then I actually came off of that business and sold those accounts to my brothers and picked up a little royalty at 24. And then I went and went and took airplane lessons at 24 and then bought an airplane when I was 24.
Okay.
And I really loved flying, and I thought I would go build houses. So I built 4 houses, and that didn't interest me very much. So then I decided to get into the commercial roofing business, and then I've been in that now for over 45 years.
And the rest is history.
Yeah.
And so I want to come back through the framework that you built into the book. So the book is Next Step, How to Start Living Intentionally and Discover What God Really Wants for Your Life. When did you publish this book?
Yeah, I mean, we published it, I think a handful of years ago.
Okay.
But the real story behind that is unbelievable. I used to get up a lot at, in the middle of the night, say 3 o'clock, things like that, and couldn't sleep. So I'd have to figure out what I was going to do to plan my day next day and things like that. So I got a 13-column accounting paper back in those days, those handwritten 13-column accounting paper, and I created a little strategy called lifeline goal setting, where I spread my life across the top of it and when I was going to go to heaven at the end. Okay. So I put, I'm 24 years old now, I'm going to go to heaven when I'm 100 years old. So I started realizing there's a lifeline I'm working here. There's a time frame across the top of this. So I did that. Then down the left side, I started saying, well, what am I going to organize myself around? So I started to create the 4 pillars then of that, which was faith, self, family, and life's work. Okay. And then I would just use the sheet as a coordinate to say, at this age, I need to do this. And at this age, I need to do this. I don't need to know how. You just put an X. Okay. And I just need to know how, or just that I'm going to do it.
The visualization.
Yeah. Well, just manifesting it, so to speak, I guess, or having faith is what I would really say. Okay. So I started working a system, and I put this into a folder, and then I created this thing 168 hours in a week. I took a little grid of a spreadsheet, and I put an hour for every box, and I said, okay, there's 168 hours in a week. What do? I sleep. I do things for myself. I do things for my family. I have to go to work. Yeah. So I colored all those boxes into 4 different colors and then took the percentages and divided it by the 168 and said, I got about 7% of my time for me, 7 hours a week, getting ready to go to work. All the other time I was working or with family. Right. So now I knew where my time was at. Okay. That was a big subject. Then I said, okay, I'm going to do this thing called the circle of influences. I said, there's about 6 different kinds of people that you just have to deal with, whether it be your parents, your brothers and sisters, your employees, your family, your wife. So you're going to have to learn how to deal with these 6 people. So if you put God in the center, put me around that, and work with these 6 different groups. So the circle of influences became a big issue. Then I rolled that into, like I said, the lifeline goal setting. But then I was journaling, and I would make all these notes. So some of the notes were fascinating. I'd say, 3:22 a.m., could not sleep. The pain is hell. I remember that note. The pain is hell. I got turned down for a $900,000 loan yesterday, and I'm struggling to make payroll. And then I would write all that down, put it in my folder, and get it off my chest, and go back to sleep. Yeah. And I did that for 35 years. Wow. 35 years.
And I bet there's a lot of individuals that are listening, right, that resonates with. Yeah. This entrepreneurial journey can be a very lonely journey. Yeah. And you waking up at 3:30, right? The responsibility for payroll, the responsibility, your income is one thing, but you're also responsible in terms of what does this mean for everyone else's income. And when the bank's not funding in certain ways for whatever reasons, and yet that pressure comes back on you. So the leadership, or heavy is the head that wears the crown, sure. So to speak. That there's pressure there, right? So this was an outlet. I don't want to say therapeutic because I think that gets taken the wrong way, but just to get that out and get that on paper. So all of that, this is the way you were living. Mm-hmm. The book kind of happened as an output of just the way that you were living life.
Yeah, I just put the file together and said, I'm going to organize this file and turn it into a book. Yeah, is what I did. I went to a doctor once when I was in my 20s and said, I got serious headaches and stomach aches. What do I do? And it was a miracle. He gave me a prescription, and he said, take this to the local bookstore. So I took it to the bookstore and to the counter, and they gave me this book on how to meditate. So no prescription drugs, no medicine. He goes, you just are running high. You just got your brains running. You got a voice in you. You need to learn how to manage that. So what a miracle they didn't give me a prescription drug to calm me down. Yeah. So that was a blessing. Oh, wow. And then when I was making my notes, it was a massive relief. So I recommend to anybody, journal as much as you can. Just write it down and say it, speak it. Here I sit, the pain is hell. I got turned down for that loan. What am I going to do tomorrow? How's the cash flow going to work? Yeah. And then I'd be able to go back to sleep. So I always had a rule that when I woke up, I wouldn't get frustrated. I would wake up and go right to the kitchen and start writing this stuff down. And about 20 minutes later, I could go back to bed.
And so to go with that a little bit more, because I think there's some people that are familiar with or are journal in their own right and what they do. Someone that's listening that's never heard of, like, what are you talking about? Yeah. Right? I mean, it really is relatively simple and straightforward. But how would you describe what journaling is to someone that has no idea what you're talking about?
Yeah. I think, you have a voice inside of you that you have to listen to. And the journal, you're just writing things down. You're just talking to yourself. Mm-hmm. And what really happened, which was so powerful, is originally I used to think it was journaling. Mm-hmm. And then when I finally got the book ready to go, I switched it to conversations with God. Mm-hmm. And I realized I wasn't journaling. I was talking to God, and he was talking to me. Mm. So it became then conversations with God.
Yeah.
And now I'm a child of God. I've got the Holy Spirit in me because I believe in God. I'm communicating to him. He's communicating back to me. Actually, one person got my book and said to me, "You didn't explain this very much. What do you mean by talk to God?" And I said, well, if you just listen to the voice in you and you believe in the Holy Spirit, that's what's happening. So I've honed that skill so well now that instantly God is talking to me all day.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what a beautiful thing to recognize as conversations with God. Now, the other thing that's interesting is when I do the Lifeline goal setting, I set it up with the 4 pillars and I spread my life across it and I just put an X what I'm going to do. At first cut, it's my plan.
Yeah.
And then what happened, which is the miracle. Once I have the conversations with God, the whole plan changes. So now I'm changing the plan after each conversation or throughout that process.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now guess what? The whole plan becomes his plan.
Yeah.
It's no longer me with my plan, me journaling. It's me doing conversations with God, plotting it on paper over the lifespan of my life.
Right. And we'll come back into some of these different segments of like how that plays itself out.
Yeah.
Before we get into the 4 pillars, you talk about this influence. The different groups of people. How would you even define influence? And do you think influence is overused or underappreciated by people in terms of the impact that they can have on the world?
Yeah. So what it became is a circle of influence, and it dawned on me. I said, well, where's the starting influence got to be? So I really created almost like a flower. Like in the very center, I just said, well, the starting influence is God, and then around God is me as the child of God. That's the center of this flower, or the circle of the circle of influences.
Okay.
And I just put these petals on there. And I said, there's about 6 groups of people. You're going to have to deal with them. Mm-hmm. Now they could take all your time, which means you can't get back to God and you can't get back to yourself. So you got to understand that if you have a wife or a spouse, or you have a parent that's a lot of a challenge, or a sibling, and you're spending all your time over there, well, you need to get back to the other 5. You need to get back to the center for God. So you only got so much time to spend with those 6. But what made a lot of sense to me is there's not hundreds of influences. They're kind of grouped down into 6. You've got brothers and sisters. They're going to influence you. You've got parents. They're going to influence you. You've got employees or a boss. They're going to influence you. You got a wife or children. They're going to influence you. Yeah. So I kind of call it like there's these 6 or so influences that if you shake your hand, they're not going away. Right. You're going to have to function in your life dealing with them. Right. So go to God, get the conversations, go deal with them, and keep working it. So I really kind of learned to work a system.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. When we talk about investment allocation and what that looks like with the estate planning strategies and investments and where you have risk and where you don't, in the spreadsheet, you mentioned it. You have 7% of your time here for self, and that's your time allocation, right? And where you're allocating time. And if people approach time in a lot of ways like they do with investments, well, where's the core of the portfolio? Where's my core of spending time? Where do I have some of the fun time built in? Where do I have that relational piece built in? Where do I have the time with God built into it? And also, when you look at that, sometimes you gotta cut out the losers, so to speak, from the portfolio in terms of where do you reduce where you have maybe too much time allocated to a certain activity, a certain segment, a certain whatever. And this is where I look at it. When people hear the word stewardship, they think about it from a financial viewpoint. And I believe stewardship, it also applies to your time, right? If you're stewarding your time well, if you're allocating that time well and filling that in. As you went through starting this out when you were in your mid-20s and putting that together, how are you actually managing that time? Because you're putting it in the spreadsheet, right? You were filling in the time blocks. What did you learn about yourself regarding your time where you're like, yeah, I got to spend less time on these sort of activities and more time on something else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what I did was once I took the four pillars, the four main things that I was going to be dealing with, I then went underneath each one of them and created three.
Okay.
So it's four pillars, which is four things I'm going to focus on, with each one having three. So faith has only three things I'm going to deal with. Self has only three. Family has only three. And life's work has only three. So in my whole world, I'm operating with four things plus 12 more. And that's everything I do is like a GPS goes back into those things.
And you still think to this day that is the way you think and organize your life?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just like a guided missile in a sense. It's like, where am I at right now? Whether I'm with faith or I'm with self or I'm with family or I'm with life work.
Yeah.
Now, when I put self in there, a lot of people don't put self. Vince Lombardi, these different guys, they go, the only thing that's important to you is your faith, your family, and the Green Bay Packers. But what I realize is if you're a drug addict, or a drug addict football player, you can't do nothing for your family, you can't do much for your faith, and you can't do much for your team. So I put self in there and said, you as the temple of the Holy Spirit, you've got to take care of yourself. So many business guys, you want to go to there, they don't take care of themselves. They don't take care of their health. They're busy making money. They're trying to do all this stuff, but around 55 years old, they get a heart attack, and where are they going to go?
Yeah.
So I really realized that you've got to take care of the temple because you're not there for your wife or your husband or your children if the temple is trashed and you're gone and your grandkids. So what a beautiful thing to have faith out there first with three things. So faith for me would be reading the Bible, going to church, and going on a mission trip. Okay. That's it. That's all I'm going to think about.
Okay.
Self for me would be eat good, exercise, and fly my helicopter.
Okay.
That's it. Drive my Ferrari. Family would be take care of my spouse, take care of my children, and take care of my friends. And that's it. Yeah. And then life's work is really beautiful because I've never worked a day in my life. Life's work to me is what's called full self-expression for income or self-gratification. Yeah. So here's the continuum that I just like to share if I can.
Oh, please. I have actually underlined that in my notes when I was going through the book and preparing myself.
Yeah. So it's so cool. When you're a little kid, 8 years old, especially a boy, you get a little crew cut and you go play all summer long and you get sweaty from playing baseball and football and you come home dirty. And you just had so much fun between the ages of like 6 and 9, I think. So I say 8 years old, right? So what a fun thing. So I say, what's your life's work at 8 years old? Full self-expression on the playground. Yeah. So now here you are fully self-expressing. Yeah. So you're not at your income earning years yet. Right. So all of a sudden there's a window, say, after you graduate school, whatever, say 28 years old, whatever. And all of a sudden that self-expressing started to go to school, but then it also went into this income earnings window. Yeah. So if you take income earning from say 28 to 65, if you don't like what you're doing, the self-expression is not going to be there. So now you're miserable. You went to prison to go to work, to get a paycheck, to get money, but you're not self-expressing. Yeah. So you've got to be able to self-express through your working years to enjoy your life. Yeah. And then after your working years are done, your income earning years are done, you're back to being 8 years old again. Now you're self-expressing on the other end of your life. Yeah. So what's the constant theme? Full self-expression. Yeah. And then there's a window in the middle for income earning years. Yeah. If you can do those things correctly, you've never worked a day in your life.
Well, and so these are the words, because I underlined it in the book here, and I'm just, you get to do what you love and hire for the rest, right? I love being an entrepreneur, but it's my calling. I love getting in the trenches, working my passion, and leading others, right? So this piece of this life's work where it's so integrated for you. Yeah. At what age did you start thinking and believing it, right? So it's one thing to say that today, looking back, but how would you frame that when you were 25 years old, right? Yeah. How did you frame that thought process? How did that evolve for you over time?
Yeah, I mean, there's no question. I had to have a lot of faith, and I had to be talking to God, and He was shaping me. Mm-hmm. One of the things that dawned on me along the way is this thing of what do you do for a living? And I guess I must like to simplify things or organize them because my dad was a math and science guy. I guess there's a lot of that in me. Yeah. So I said, there's only 3 careers you can ever have. That's it. What are you talking about? So if I tell everybody, right, there's only 3 jobs you're going to get, 3 careers. So you're either going to be a worker, a manager, or a boss. Now, what's the definition? So a worker is a person that works with 2 hands, and when they stop, the work stops. So a manager is a person that works with 1 hand and tells other people what to do, or builds a team. He has leverage. And a boss works with no hands and tells everybody what to do. So I think career planning is based on your personality at 8 years old. So when your parents look at you and they say, I think you're a violinist, they're right. You're a violinist. Go be one. Or if your personality is leadership, then you're a boss. Don't suppress that. So I know from my years as a little guy, I was a boss. So I was a boss at 8 years old. I was a boss on the playground. I was the guy you couldn't catch when we were playing tag. I was fast. I was quick. So I was a boss. So I kind of pushed that into my career and realized, Tim, you're a boss. Now, if you are a guy that likes to work with your hands, the secret is to pick a high-paid worker job. So a high-paid worker job is a brain surgeon. So you can pick a low-paid worker job, and that'll project your income forever. You've decided to do this menial work, and you're working with your hands, and that pay can be projected 30 years out, and there's your income. So you're stuck in a lot of ways. Well, if you decide to go to school and become a brain surgeon, you're still a worker. Michael Jordan was a worker.
Right.
So it's okay to be a worker. Nothing wrong with that. But the secret,
can use both hands dribbling pretty well. And shooting,
I guess I learned from the division of the classes, or it was one of those books I read. It talked about, that the more education you have, the better off you're going to be, right? In the division of the classes. I think it was called The Wealth of Nations, that book, right? So Michael Jordan was a worker. A brain surgeon's a worker. So if you like to be a worker with your 2 hands, then pick a high-paid one's my advice. And if you're a manager, then realize you get the leverage off 200 people working for you, so your pay could go up pretty good. But then if you're a boss, you can work with no hands. So one guy was running this massive bank one time, and he brought his VPs into the office and said, let me show you what's in my office as CEO of this big bank. And he opened up the drawers in his office, and there was nothing in them. And they go, where's all your stuff? He goes, well, all the VPs have it. I'm the boss. So it's not egotistical or not trying to be humble, but what a cool thing to leverage yourself. And know how to do that.
Well, but what do you share with the violinist? That there's a lot of musicians that don't, make a lot of money in terms of being the violinist, but to encourage, right? Because if you see that 8-year-old as a violinist, and she or he is great at what they're doing, and that's who they're going to, who they were made to be. How do you encourage them in that, where they're not going to probably make as much money unless they become, right, that New York Philharmonic seat 1 violinist?
Well, they say that man was born to win, but he's been conditioned to lose. So there's this little kid that the parents see, the child, and sees the gift. Well, that's a massive gift. Now, if you let the world say it's not, and you go listen to the world, then the kid's not going to have the gift no more. So you've got to be wise and be able to say, I see this gift in my child, and we're going to promote that, and we're going to encourage that. Whether the child owns a music store one day, whether the child owns a bunch of music stores one day. So you could bring entrepreneurialism into the music store, into that child that can play the violin. So you say, okay, you're a great violinist, and you're going to have to learn how to do entrepreneurial skills too. And you're going to be doing your violin, but you're also going to be running a business at the same time, maybe. Right.
I always told my kids, it's like, figure out what you love doing, and then go figure out how to make money at it. The individuals that just try to figure out how to go make money is unsatisfying, right? It ends up being a dead end, or whether burnout, fatigue, right?
Well, there's no self-expression.
There's no self-expression.
And once that's gone, well, who wants to play?
Right. So then, how do you come along? Because if everyone said that I want to be the boss, right, and I want to own it all, you'd have no one working for you in the roofing company.
That's a great point, John. And what's interesting about that? It doesn't hold water. Everybody can be the boss, and then we're a world of bosses.
Keep sharing more.
So if you think about it, the mindset just continues to go on and on and on. I think in some of these other countries, I'm not sure if Japan or China, which one, has tons of these little teeny weeny shops, right? And I think the automakers gets all these little parts from all these little shops. I think I heard about, right? Well, that guy's a boss. So he's working, but he's also a boss, right? So kind of a boss is somewhat of a mindset, because obviously I work, I work, but But once you're a worker and you have no manager or boss mindset, you're just kind of stuck, right?
Yeah.
Everybody has the ability to have full self-expression, all for the glory of God, all for the glory of free enterprise, and they can achieve anything they want. There's no capping anybody.
Yeah. There's a book I recently read called Extreme Ownership, and written from a couple individuals that were SEAL team members from the U.S. Navy. And I love the fact that they started out their book going, we don't like the fact that some people, capitalize on their military experience, which, given my military experience, I absolutely agree with. And so the fact that that's where they started, I appreciate it, right? Kind of starting from this point of humility and going, but we have some things to share. Not too different than even our conversation today. There's some items to be shared and learned, and the concept of extreme ownership. So if you go back, a lot of people point to the military. Command and control, it's from the generals or the admirals on down through the organization. But the point is, if the frontline person isn't fully equipped and trained and able to do what they do, the people around them are at risk. And then you talk about the need to adapt and overcome whatever the circumstances might be thrown. There has to be an extreme ownership mindset, and there's no blame game going on. There's no finger pointing going on. So any individual, right, might be layers down in a military organization, but they still have ownership of whatever it is that they're doing. Mm-hmm. And those individuals, and whether they are workers, managers, the top boss, the owner of a company, everyone should be demonstrating ownership with respect to how they're engaging the world around them, taking that personal accountability in what they're doing. So I just love that, and we've shared it. Our operating committee has read the book, because if everyone operates as an owner, the entire organization gets better because people figure out the boss doesn't have all the answers.
Right, and with that, I think what's really misunderstood is the levels of skill that happen. So, what is a person that starts something? He's an apprentice, right? So then the apprentice becomes a journeyman,
right? And
then the journeyman becomes a foreman, and the foreman becomes a supervisor. The next, he might become a teacher. He might become a mentor. Yeah. So I have people that work for me that are have careers, and they know they have a pension at the end. And what I've noticed is they do a 5-year apprenticeship. They level it. And they go right to the end of their career for 25 years. Okay. And I go, guys, why aren't you becoming a superintendent? I've had so many people say to me, I have no desire to be a superintendent. I don't want to be a teacher. I don't want to be the leader. Well, that's not fair. Everybody has an obligation to continue to up their game in their life. Otherwise, you get bored and you get frustrated. So what is the highest thing you can be is probably a mentor. Yeah. Before a mentor, you could be a teacher. So if you take the apprentice, the journeyman, the foreman, the superintendent, then the teacher, then the mentor. Yeah. You got a lot of work you can do. Yeah. So today in my life, I'm positioning myself as a mentor and as a leader, but I've done all those other things along the way.
So I want to go back to your spreadsheet and time allocation for a second, because it just struck me. You carved out time to be here today to join me. So first and foremost, thank you for doing that.
Sure.
Carving this time out. Why would you carve the time out to spend with me recording this podcast? How does this fit into your pillar structure, the way you look at the world regarding what this time together means for you personally, Tim? Yeah. We did talk about that in preparation. It just struck me in the moment here too, if you wouldn't mind sharing. Yeah, I set myself up for risk, so I'm really curious to your answer.
It's cool. So now what's happening is I position myself now to be a strategic leader now. So I'm not a tactical worker at all, and I won't do tactical work. So I'm a strategic leader now, and I'll do that based on my age and my experience. I'm a strategic leader. So if you want to talk with me and deal with me, I'll deal with you strategically. But all the youthful people, the younger managers, all those people, they got to do the tactical work. That's just how it is. Yeah. So 10 o'clock to me is what's called the magic hour. I'm at my best. I have the most energy.
10 a.m., right?
10 a.m. Yeah, 10 a.m. I'm in bed at 8 o'clock. 10 a.m. So today, if I can get one meeting a day and walk into it as a power meeting, I will accomplish everything I needed today. So I don't need to work 8 hours a day or 16 hours a day. That's a waste of time. But if I can be ready to go for a one meeting at 10 o'clock and spend an hour or two in that meeting, I can move mountains.
Yeah.
Is what I've realized.
Yeah. Well, and leveraging your time. I mean, that's in some ways, even this communication platform that this is leveraging time for more people across the world. We talked a little bit about the statistics of individuals we have listening from Australia to Germany, UK. I mean, it's quite amazing, very humbling to me.
Sure.
But sharing this, because I was fascinated in our conversations in your book and going through the details, because I do think you have a lot to share. And if we go back earlier in the career, and I'm going to flip to another page in the book. One of the items that you wrote, there are two key triggers I've identified in my 30 years of teaching others how to set and achieve goals. So again, teaching others, and you just used that word again. First is that fear comes before confidence. So first is that fear comes before confidence. And second is that you won't necessarily know how to do something you decide you want to do. Those two triggers are big distinctions.
Oh, yeah, that is so powerful, so powerful. So the central nervous system does not build confidence until you put it into fear. So if you take your little 5-year-old child and you want to bring it to kindergarten, and you stand at the door of the room, that little kid's going to grab your leg and hold on to the dad's leg or the mom's leg, and he's at the line of fear.
Yeah.
So he's at the line of fear, and everyone's done that with their little child.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden they coaxed him. They put their hand on their back gently, and they coaxed him off their leg and let him get into the room. Yeah. And then all of a sudden he's past the fear line, or she's past the fear line, right? And now the kid's playing, and now the parent says, "Hey, come back here and say goodbye to me," and the kid won't even come back.
Right.
So what you learn now, which is really cool, is you bring yourself to the line of fear in a business deal, in a relationship, in a loan request, in an investment, and you stand there and you say to yourself, I am at the line of fear. My central nervous system doesn't like none of this. But if I wait, it'll start processing. It'll start calculating. And about 20 minutes later, it'll give me the answers.
Yeah.
So what a miracle.
And this is the thing that I think is encouraging, because, I mean, if people heard it, if we back up here a little bit, you've got pretty sizable piece of property. You mentioned your helipad and your enjoyment for flying and the cars, and you enjoy all of that, and that's wonderful. Juxtapose that against, at 16 years old, you were dropping out of high school and you had started your family, right? And so that journey that's there, you had a lot of fear over the years, right? It doesn't just happen where all of a sudden you wake up one day in terms of realizing the business success, where you're at, how you've achieved what you've achieved. I think that's encouraging to a lot of entrepreneurs out there, because there's fear a lot, and that's not a negative emotion.
Right.
How would you encourage those individuals that feel like they're waking up with fear every day right now?
Yeah. So what's happening is, we're a physical being. We think we're managing ourselves with education and knowledge and things like that. But we're also emotional, and we have a central nervous system that's running in the background. So once you understand that, and which I understand now, I bring myself to the line of fear. It's not because I'm not smart at that moment. Intellectually, I know where I'm at. I know what I'm doing, but my body's not ready.
Right.
So I let the central nervous system catch up. Now, the other point you mentioned earlier was, what about you don't? What I think you said. You don't have to know where how to get there.
Yes. Is it the second? Is that you won't necessarily know how to do something you decide you want to do.
Yeah. So that's big. So what happens is people say, "Well, I'm not going to set this goal, whether it be for financial freedom, whether it be for investments or legacy or anything, until I know how to do it." That's exactly the opposite. You have to set the goal first. Then God will bring you all the resources you need. The world will bring you all the resources you need. So you have to set it.
Yeah.
So, for example, great story. When I was in my 30s, I always wanted to have a corporate jet. So I bought a Learjet model. I put my company logo on the model, and I set that jet on my desk, and I wrote on the engine 10 years later. So I put it on the desk. Everybody walked in my office for 10 years. Now, didn't have the money. I didn't know where I was going to get the money. I didn't know how to do it, but I wanted it. And so I had faith that I could get it. So I put the jet on my desk. Everybody walked in for 10 years, picked up that model, looked at it, twisted it, and whatever, and said, "What is this?" And I said, "Well, that's the jet I'm going to buy in 10 years." And they said, "Wow, that's really cool." And I did no idea how.
Yeah.
So 10 years later, I was like, "Oh man, I don't know if I could buy that." So I went to Lake and Hills Airport. I gave Howard Seedorf $20,000. I said, "Give me 20 hours of jet time so I can hit my goal." It was $1,000 an hour at the time. So I'm flying around in this jet for 20 hours. I burn up the 20 grand. The voice inside of me says, "You did not hit your goal. You spent 10 years telling the world and manifesting and saying to yourself, you're going to buy that. So you better do it." Like, cool, right? So I go get this magazine, I flip the pages, and I see the jet in there, and I'm like, wow, okay, there's the one I want, a Lear 24D. So I call up Greg Love down in Florida, and I go, "Hey, how much is that jet?" And he tells me the price. And I go, "Well, how do I buy that?" He goes, "Well, I can get you 100% financing." I go, "Okay, that's interesting." I go, "Well, how do I pay that?" He goes, "Well, I can get an air ambulance company to lease it from you, and then when you want it, you can go on it, and then when you're not on it, they'll be chartering it from you. And they'll pay the payment." I go, "Cool." So I literally said yes with my faith. I made 2 signatures and had the jet, not one dime of money.
And how old were you at this point in time?
35.
35.
And so I set it at 25.
And so having the visualization that was something that you wanted to do and achieve.
And not knowing how I was going to do it. That was the component.
Right,
Otherwise, I wouldn't have said it.
Right.
So people are waiting forever to say, "I need to get more information before I set the goal." Well, the goal, it really kind of works like this. Everybody is running around with dreams all day long going on in their head. So there's dreams running in your head. And what you have to do is you have to go up in there and grab a dream and make it a goal.
Yeah.
So you can only take one. You can't take all of the dreams.
Take all of them. Yeah.
So you got to go grab a dream, reduce it to a goal, hang on to the goal.
Yeah.
Then you got to create a plan. Then you got to take action to the plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the formula for success in almost all those components.
Yeah. Somebody once said that vision without execution is hallucination, right? And if you have vision but you can't execute upon that, you're not willing to execute upon that.
Yeah.
Then it's all the dreams, right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of dreams that are unfulfilled dreams, but as you're reaching in and grabbing that one, right, or maybe that 2, and maybe they evolve over time, but you're grabbing the one, and then you're bringing focused attention to execution to make that happen. And a lot, again, the entrepreneurial journey, there's a lot of that fear on the front end of it and not knowing how to make that happen. But are you visualizing? Are you staying focused on the goal of what is it you believe you're supposed to achieve?
Yeah.
Because then you'll figure it out. Now, you have what I think is a fantastic story that you shared with me about here we are in the northwest suburbs of Chicago, downtown Sears Tower. At a point in time, Sears was moving out of downtown, and they were building a big complex out here a few years ago.
Yep.
For those maybe not even familiar with the Sears name anymore,
in
right?
Hoffman Estates, right?
Might not be anymore. But it's absolutely, I think, a fantastic story regarding not knowing how to do something and then figuring it out as you go. And I think from a business learning aspect, this is how a lot of people have to figure it out. And you can have some fear on the front end of it, but then be dedicated to figuring it out. Would you mind sharing that story and walking through that?
Sure. Yeah. So we were, I think it was a recession at the time, and we were bidding the Sears Headquarters in Hoffman Estates. So we put together our bids and submitted them, and I think we were negotiating for almost 2 years, and my sales VP walked in and he said, "We just lost the job." And in a matter of seconds, I said, "No, we didn't lose that job." I said, "What was our price?" He said it was $3.3 million. I said, "Well, give him a new price at $3 million and fax it over to him right now." So he faxed it over to him at $3 million. And they said, "Well, come on in for a scope review meeting." So they went in for a scope review meeting. I said, "I'm not available. Just let them know that. I'm going to go talk to the manufacturer, see if I can justify why I just dropped this price $300 grand, because I want to be ethical about what I'm doing." So I went to the convention to kind of negotiate that price. And then he went to the scope review meeting to talk about the job. So I came back to my room at the hotel, and my little blinking light was on, and it said, "Congratulations." When I picked it up, "You've been awarded the Sears Headquarters for $3 million." So I came back then from that convention. I sat in a project meeting with my PMs and things like that. I said, "Okay, what's the budget on this job?" They go, "Well, it's $3 million, and we're going to be at 2.5% gross margin." I'm like, "Well, we can't do that. We're not going to make any money. We got to be at 25%. I go, "Change the budget to 25%. They go, "Well, how do you change it?" I go, "Just change it. Change the labor, change the material, and bring it back to me. It's like, all right. So they bring it back at 25%. And then I'm like, okay, what's some details in this project that we have to understand? And I go, well, there's going to be these patio pavers on the roof that are 2 foot by 2 foot, and they weigh about 175 pounds apiece. And there's going to be 300 semi-loads and 127,000 of those. I go, well,
small project,
yeah.
Right?
I go, you know what? They're going to give us a workman's comp claim. Our guys' backs are going to be hurting. I go, we got to figure a way not to touch those pavers with human hands. We got to install them all without ever touching them. Mm-hmm. They're like, wow, what are you talking about? So I got this engineering magazine on my desk, and I said, I bet you there's some kind of device in this magazine that we can use and adapt it to figure this out. So we flip through the pages. I find this little thing called a Unimove. It's a little slinky-type suction device that you can hang on an overhead crane. So I modified a little wagon, overhead crane, took it out back, and had my guys install pavers and time how long it would take to install pavers in our back lot. Okay. So they got it down where they could install a pallet of pavers in 5 minutes. They came back to the estimators and factored that in, and that saved $450,000. So now I'm getting some margin on this job. And then I said, okay, now this job is so complex, we have to add management. So whenever you got a problem in business, the solution is to add management, not reduce the management. You got to add it. So you have to go into the fire, I call it. So I decided to put a job trailer on the job, go to the job, and spend 2 years myself managing that job. So then we did the job, and we installed the pavers, and they want a different one. So finally I got a change order for $1 million, which cost me $300,000. So I made another 700 G's.
Right.
So now the contract price is $5 million. I'm getting my margin, but I had the faith to do that, and I took that risk. And the knowledge really, I don't think is in us per se. I don't think we're walking around with our head full of knowledge, to be honest with you. Our brain is 90% water. I don't know if water's knowledge. I think the Holy Spirit is the knowledge. So if you are listening to the Holy Spirit, God will bring you everything you want. So you don't think just because you went to school and you got this education that it resides necessarily in you.
Yeah.
You might have the mechanism to know how to get it and draw it, but I don't know that it's really in you as much as it's in the universe. All the knowledge, if you think about it, everything to do with this universe, God already knows.
Right.
So you're not going to go to school and get knowledge that God doesn't know about.
And,
so the best guy that's going to give you the knowledge is God. What?
And you have to seek it out, and you have to in seeking that out to learn. Because when you stepped in and said take it down to $3 million, right, to 2.5% gross margin,
right,
you didn't know how you were going to actually make that work,
right.
And so what prompted you to take that first action? Why would you take that step? And call it a step of faith. Taking that step of saying, we're going to do it. We're going to do it at $3 million, and then we'll figure it out after the fact.
Yeah.
What prompted you to do that?
Yeah. So there's a little philosophy I have there that's called estimate the job to take it. So the first stage is you have to beat the competition to get your product, get what you want.
Yeah.
So you have to estimate it to take it.
Yeah.
That's step one. Now you got it.
Right.
You beat the competition. You got what you needed. Right. So now you took
Careful what you asked for, or is it?
So now that you took it, you're going to have to start managing it. So change some materials, change some equipment, change the specs, change the scope. So now you're going to start to manage it. So estimate it to take it to manage it. You're going to have to manage it.
Yeah.
And then that'll give you the profit. So I invented some equipment, some different procedures, and I added my management to it, and that's what caused it to profit. So that kind of happens all the time.
Well, so let's talk about management a little bit more. If I heard you correctly, you were saying don't cut back on management. You actually have to get into the fire, add management, and there's a lot of individuals going, well, no, I started the business. I got to where I'm at, right? I'm going to go hire my managers that are out there. But you put the trailer on. You sat on site for the time in order to get that project done, to get the profitability, rolling up your sleeves, getting your hands dirty, going back to the, both hands were dirty, right? You were involved with it in order to manage it and make it real.
Yeah.
Where does that happen? Now you have other people that manage those projects for you. But what did you learn from being the hands-on management to make this project as successful as it was?
Well, I think it showed me a lot of confidence in the ability to stay in the fight and show up and be present, and then let that knowledge develop as you're working the project or working the situation. Yeah. No different than going to get bank loans in the past. I'd walk in to a bank on 47th and Ashland when I was 25 and get a bank loan, and my palms were sweating, and I'd go to the bathroom and dry them off and come and shake my banker's hand, you
Yeah.
know. And funny story there was I met a guy named Nels Johnson and Tom Carmody that came out of the First National Bank of Chicago back in the day, and they bought the Drovers Bank on 47th and Ashland.
Okay.
And a guy named Tom Wiley that owned Schwartz Brothers Real Estate. These guys were all in their 60s and 65, 70-year-old guys, I think. And I was 25.
Okay.
And Tom Wiley took me to meet the guys at Drovers Bank and introduced me to them and said, these guys need you. I'm like, I need like a loan for $100,000. I'm 25 years old. I need them bad. And he goes, no, they need you bad. You're a guy that's got some talent, some skill, and they got the money. They need you. He goes, so we're in this meeting, and actually a guy, Jim Corkery, which is a banker, a big-time banker now, and he was the same age as me, and he wasn't even a vice president yet. So these old guys are talking to us, and they go, okay, you two guys can work together as a banker and entrepreneur.
Yeah.
We're going to give you a $100,000 line of credit today. And just on my signature, I learned this word called sundry property. So on my P&L, I had like these assets, and then I had this word called sundry property for $50,000, so to get some equity on there. And I didn't even know what that word meant at the time. So they gave me a loan for $100,000, and next thing you know, I'm doing my business, and I start losing some money. And I got about a $200,000 line of credit. Then I got about a $250,000 line of credit, and finally, Jim Corkery goes, you got to fix this thing. You got to learn how to run this business. You got to know what cash flow is.
Right.
And he goes, you come here every Friday at 10 o'clock. I'm like, drive down to 47th and Ashland every Friday at 10 o'clock. He goes, you got darn right. We're going to call the loan.
Right.
So I go down there, and he would give me a demand note for $5,000 every week, or $7,000 or $8,000. I have a whole pile of them. It's like a museum right now. And they were pink and green and yellow, to be honest with you, different kinds.
So if you actually saved,
I saved these.
This? Yeah.
This is going to be a book.
Yeah.
So next, I'm coming down there to Jim Corkery every week to get this loan, and he's giving to me. So now we're up to $500,000 on these little loans and stuff, and back and forth, and I still lost some money. So Nels Johnson, he used to sit there, and he was the senior banker.
Okay.
And his eyes were like half closed while he's talking to us. He's just looking at my character to see if I'm lying and see if I'm an ethical guy, and I always was. And so Nell says to me, and Jim Corkery sitting there, and he goes, I think you need to tell us the list of your equipment, and we need to call this loan. And he goes, so why don't you go figure that out? I go, so I go leave, I come back, and he goes, okay, you got the list of equipment? I go, no, I don't have the list. It's in my head. I go, I owe you $550,000. I need about $800,000. So I want you to roll all these little notes up into one, give me the term that I need, and I'm going to make this thing work. So he goes, really? So Jim Corkery sends me a commitment going, okay, we've approved your loan for like $650,000. So now I'm going and doing real good. And then finally I get a letter from Jim Corkery one day. And he says, congratulations, all your ratios are better than industry average. You're doing great. So I kind of figured, you know what? Good time to get an increase. So I go, hey, Jim. Jim, thank you very much for the nice letter. Can you raise my line to 750? And he sends me back a note going, yeah, your line's 750 now. So that was a big story.
Yeah. And how important, because I see a lot of entrepreneurs, and it's like they don't really understand their financials.
Yeah.
And how to read the basics of a P&L, a balance sheet, and a cash flow statement.
Yeah.
How important it is to you at 25, really young, going through, and you had to understand your financials.
Yeah. So I mean, Warren Buffett said it great. He goes, accounting is the language of business.
Yeah.
All right. So thank God that Jim Corkery and the Drovers Bank, which became the Colt Taylor Bank after that.
Okay.
So that they knew enough to say, we're going to cash flow manage you. You're going to come in here, and we're going to teach you cash flow. We're going to give you this little loan of $5 or $7 or $8 every week.
Yeah.
And you're going to learn cash flow. So I learned what cash flow was. I learned what projections were. Yeah. And I did a spreadsheet all the time. And every time I had a problem, I would run a spreadsheet 3 years in the future to solve my problem.
Right.
And I just do that and do that and do that. So there is no question accounting must be known by the guy that runs that business. Yeah. I love a balance sheet. I love a P&L. Yeah. And I know them like the back of my hand today. My accountant says to me, Tim, you appreciate accounting. And that's what guys don't do. They don't appreciate it. So I really appreciate it. I want my accounting done every week, every month. I want to see it. And I really enjoy the accounting aspect.
Well, and I agree with that. The Buffett quote that you had in terms of it is the language of business. I mean, if you're playing there's a book written a long time ago, The Game of Business. And if you watch any game, baseball, football, pick your game. If you don't understand how the game is played, you don't understand. Is it a high score that wins in baseball, or is it a low score in golf that wins? If you understand how the score is actually being played and how all the leading statistics feed into the output of winning that game, you're not actually even playing the game.
Yeah.
Right? You're pretending a bit, but you don't know if you're winning or losing or how it's. So the metrics and the activities and how that plays out and it gets manifested in the financials is so critical.
You're right. And the thing that's interesting about that, and here's a great story for a lot of guys to learn and understand. So I'm giving my bank the P&Ls and the balance sheet, and I didn't know what financial ratios meant at the time. Mm. So that's a new thing I learned, and it's really a great thing. And go learn financial ratios, but at the first cut, I'm just got the balance sheet, the P&L, trying to understand what gross margin is and overhead and sales and profit. So that's all I know. So I give the balance sheet and to my banker, and they'll ask me questions. So I'm like, okay, I'm a smart guy. I can answer these questions. So they go, well, how's your receivables? I go, yeah, they're good. My receivables are great. They're really great. They go, are you collecting?
I got a lot of them.
They go, are you collecting them all on time? I go, yeah, I'm collecting them all on time. Yeah, they're coming in. I'm collecting them on time, and they got the balance sheet now.
Yeah,
right. I go, yeah, that's what's up. He goes, okay, great. He goes, what about your payables? Are you paying them on time? I go, yeah, I'm keeping them current. Those are pretty good. Now, what I didn't realize is from a balance sheet, when they do a financial analysis, they can tell you the days outstanding on your receivables.
Yeah,
they can tell you the days outstanding on your payables.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that. So I'm sitting there saying these words to them, and they're testing me, going, this guy's either lying to us or he knows this truth.
Right.
But what a fascinating thing. Once I learned the ratios, I realized, wow, that document really speaks to you.
Yeah.
You can tell the days outstanding for my receivables by reading the balance sheet and the P&L.
Yeah.
And same with the accounts payable.
Yeah.
And then when you start to get into liquidity ratios and debt to equity ratios, so that's where the banker would say, we'll give you all the money you need if you can hold the ratios.
Right.
Like, why would you say that to me? I didn't understand that. But now I realize the risk is mitigated if the ratios hold.
Right. The story that just popped into my mind, because I want to talk a little bit about charitable work too.
Sure.
That you do. Because there's a tax status between a for-profit and not-for-profit, right?
Yeah.
The level of excellence that needs to be brought to bear on that. And that's true in financials too. It's, the more complicated the organization, okay, there's more complicated financials, but then there's cores that you have to understand. And when it comes into evaluating charitable entities, was working with one family that had a grant request come in. They're figuring that out, looking at that end charity, got the financials from that end charity, and it just was, they sent it over. We're looking at it. We're talking about it. It just doesn't make any sense. Because of looking at the ratios, right? And looking at certain aspects and tying together the three different financial statements.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation then with the leadership of the organization and listen, I don't know your organization, right? And I don't mean to be cast in stones. This just doesn't make sense to me in going through it. And they're like, well, thank you so much. Came back. A few weeks later, they came back and said, that was a really hard conversation, but we can't thank you enough, because we actually went back to our auditors and the financial statements were misrepresented. And the auditors are actually restating all the financials for them. So when you're looking at your business, when something doesn't make sense, whether it's dealing with the bank or dealing with a charity or a charitable entity, to figure out, is that charity running well? Do you give of the financial capital you've created? Do you turn around and give that to an organization? Well, it better be running well. That's part of that broad-based stewardship responsibility that you have.
Yeah.
And it applies in the for-profit world and it applies in the not-for-profit world. So when you think about nonprofit work, you sit on a board, there's charities that reflect your values that you want to give back to. Would you mind sharing a little bit more about that, of like how you assess what makes a good charitable organization versus one that you're not interested in even talking about?
Yeah, I think the first thing is are you passionate about it? Like I saved my son from abortion, and now I work with Save a Life International out of Philadelphia and Ukraine and Poland, and I'm actually on their board now. And so my passion is for they help women in crisis pregnancy. So I have a passion for that. Yeah. And then what's my capacity to help them? Well, when I analyze their financial statements and I see their ratios, what cash on hand they have or what the overhead is, what does the founder get paid? So what I like to do is I like to know the founder or the president of the organization or the executive director and know that person. And then when I look at their financial statement, I'd like to look and see, what is the pay, what is the overhead, and what are they really, how much money is really going out in the field.
Yeah.
Now, one thing that a lot of people do is, and I think the National Christian Foundation put out an article not too long ago that said, don't always go for the overhead number and keep it below 20%. That's kind of the benchmark that says if the overhead is below 20%, it's a good nonprofit. Because they said, well, how do you grow a nonprofit unless you increase your staff and increase things and spend some money? So that's a thing for people to realize. It's okay for that nonprofit to have a higher overhead than 20%, as long as it's going for the right resources and things like that.
Right. So similar to a J curve from a private equity investment, right? Up front, you may be losing a little bit of money in that new venture, but getting in and asking those questions, the allocation of the time. I mean, you firsthand traveled over, you spent time in Ukraine, spent time working with the individuals. It wasn't just writing a check. Is that a practice of yours normally then too, to really get to know the leadership, like you say, in the operation?
Well, the thing that really happened to me is along the way, as I built and ran my profit business, I then learned about guys that were capping their income or hitting their what's called financial finish line and starting donating money back, whether it be Hobby Lobby or Chick-fil-A or other organizations. So I learned that. And I started then coming off of my profit world mentality and learning about stewardship of money and giving it back to God's kingdom. So what I kind of started to do is move towards realizing, why do I have this big goal to run this business? It's to give the money away. So I make a good living, but I want to give 50% of my profit away now. Last year I gave 100% of my profit away. So my goal is to give money away now. So I now know God put in my heart the ability to do business so I can make money and circulate it and give it. So that's so exciting for me now.
In the world can step back and they hear that, right? You gave 100% of the profits away last year. But what a lot of the world, and this is where judgment comes in and people placing their judgment on things, there runs the risk of people going, yeah, but you just told me you have a helicopter, right? And then they don't see or don't know about the fact that you gave away all of your profits to individuals around the world in all these different organizations. And I wish people would just stop that, right? I mean, I wish it would just be like, why project the judgment on individuals if you don't know the individuals, you don't know their motives, you don't know their heart, you don't know. And so is there an aspect where giving and living generously like that needs more attention and not more visibility, and I'm not suggesting everybody needs their name on a banner or a name on a wall, but where does it become inspiring to others versus the world casting judgment on also the fruits of your labor, which even biblically is, you're blessed and you can enjoy that. That's not a sin in its own right. How do you live in both of those worlds? Of I enjoy the finer things in life, and I'm giving extremely generously.
Yeah, I think you go to business and you work and you make money, and you've got to take care of your family, and you've got to get a house and a mortgage, all these things. So that's all the basics of moving through life, right? But all of a sudden you realize that your business is doing good because you're gifted or God's helping you. You have to start paying attention to that. There's a reason that you are getting more because you're stewarding what you have better, and you just can't hoard it and hang on to it and say, this is all because of me. So I realized that the biggest goals I've had, God's really given them to me. I put them through the business, and if the business can make more money, it's designed to overflow. So what I'm all about now is I'm so excited to overflow the bucket of money and let that money go. I'm not afraid of it. It just keeps coming in and goes out. So I work with 7 nonprofits right now, from Save Life International to Open Eyes to Corporate Chaplains of America, Christians Against Poverty, Administered Justice, Empowered Poor, and Generation Distinct.
Okay.
I know all the founders. I donate to all of them, and it's been the most exciting thing I've ever done in my life. Think about this.
Yeah.
I've been in business for over 50 years. In the last 2 years, I've really gotten bigger and deeper into these nonprofits. The last 3 years. I've had more joy in 3 years than I had in 50 years of business.
Okay.
So in 50 years of earning money, and competing with businesses against competitors, serving the customer to make a profit.
Yeah.
I now serve God in the nonprofit side,
Yeah.
which is unconditional. It's so fulfilling. It's so exciting. I look at business now and say that amounts for about 20% of my excitement. I get 80% of my excitement now by taking that money, giving it to these 7 nonprofits. So I went to Ukraine, like you said, with Save a Life International twice. And on my way there, I'm like, I think I'm going to have to give a speech. And I just started writing a speech in my notepad. And I got there and I'm talking to 50 women that are pregnant. They've been raped by soldiers. Their husbands want them to have an abortion. And I'm talking to these 50 women with an interpreter in Save a Life's Life Center. And it was the most rewarding, fulfilling thing I've done in my life.
Really?
Then I went to the hospital and they said, we have this equipment sitting in the hallway right now, X-ray equipment. And the hospital looked like the worst high school in Chicago.
Really?
I mean, that's how bad the
Infrastructure was.
was. So they go, this X-ray equipment is sitting in a hallway in this Ukrainian hospital, but nobody will let us build the X-ray room with the walls we need to install it because they won't give grants for construction, only for the equipment.
Okay.
So I said to Nadia Grudinsky, which was the founder of Save a Life there, I said, well, what do they need? How much are they talking about? She goes, well, they need $12,000. So I go, tell them I'll give them $12,000.
Yeah.
So I gave them $12,000 to build that room. We went back a year later for the ribbon cutting of the room. That was more joy than the Sears Headquarters.
Wow.
That was more joy than anything. And then just recently I went to Cuba with Open Eyes, which Frank Harrison is a nonprofit of his that owns Coca-Cola Bottling Company. And we went to Cuba and they gave away motorcycles to mobile messengers.
Okay.
And again, the most exciting thing I've ever done. So
even from talking about the projects earlier in business to your excitement, your enthusiasm, your energy, your voice, the pace of this conversation,
yes.
It's just you get that sense. So individuals that step back and like, well, no, I'm giving to charity and I'm doing it through my estate plan. And in the end, how would you both encourage, but also challenge? And when I say challenge other individuals, I mean, there's on one hand, you have the whatever it was, the Billionaires Challenge in terms of giving away the estates. How would you encourage and challenge other entrepreneurs out there, families that are listening, in terms of how they think about this subject of what their charitably, their philanthropy, their generosity, whatever word you want to put on it, of giving back, but doing it in your lifetime versus just waiting to the end?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got to realize you filled up the first bucket. The money's still coming into the first bucket. You're getting a return on that bucket. The real issue is how much can overflow and can go to help God's kingdom and help the people. And and how generous are you in that space? I mean, money is something that needs to flow. Otherwise, it gets stale, in my opinion. So if you're hanging on to $700,000 and you're retired and you're never going to spend a penny, believe me, if you open up a little flow on that, you would have a better life. So what I've learned is you make money and you give money and you get this flow going. So most people think that just the church is the answer. You got to tithe and you give 10% and that's all you do. That's the beginning. That's just the start. So if that's all you're doing, you're not even living yet. So now, there's hundreds of nonprofits that are little entrepreneurs with dreams and goals. There's really more nonprofits probably than churches. So if you think, where is God's kingdom? Where's the body of Christ? Certainly it's in the church, but it's also in all these little nonprofits. So what a beautiful thing to invest. Generation Distinct, Hannah Gronowski has a $300,000 or $150,000 budget. And she's helping young adults find their purpose. What a valuable thing to invest in. And she's in her 20s trying to build this thing. You talk about an investment in a little entrepreneur that runs a nonprofit. Like Nadia at Save a Life, that's 10 years old this year. She started with $200. So what a return that you can get by saying, if I give you $50,000, that's like a massive infusion of money for you. And then they go open a life center or they help these women in crisis pregnancy. So you talk about an investment. And
it's the entrepreneurial legacies in their own right. Entrepreneurial legacies doesn't mean, and this is really fresh for me, even in this conversation with you right now, Tim, is it being, whatever you're leading, wherever you're, you have a vision, you're casting that, you're growing that, you're making a difference in the world. Then those are entrepreneurs, right? These nonprofits.
They are.
The tax status of for-profit, not-for-profit is a tax code item. Has nothing to do with the spirit of the individual, the work that they're finding their hand doing. and then fulfilling that independent of the tax code and doing it with excellence.
Yeah. And you think about it, you're talking to a person that's got $1 million budget and they're making $85,000 under president.
Right.
What you're making 85 grand and you're running this and you're happy and you're excited?
Right.
Another one's making like 50 grand.
Right.
It's like no entrepreneur would do that.
Right.
They want to make a bunch of money. So you're talking about where's the spirit?
Yeah.
And so what a beautiful investment. And I recommend absolutely, the real big organizations, you don't get near the top people, so to speak. So you're donated in there and it's like what? But what a cool thing to actually have a meeting with this person that has got only a 300 grand budget.
Yeah.
And you've got all this wealth. And you say, what are you trying to do? They want to build 2 life centers. They need $100,000 and you can give them 30 of that to make their life change.
Yeah.
Talk about making an impact.
Well, and so you have 7 in what I'll call your giving portfolio.
Yeah.
Right.
And
there's no magic right number in that.
Well, 7's a cool number in the Bible.
Yes, it is. But you're not 70, right?
Right.
Because with 70, you can't manage that necessarily. You can't know how it's actually being deployed, and that responsibility back to the time and your talent, right? You being there, you being on the ground, literally in Ukraine or Cuba or elsewhere. Yeah. So bringing your time and talent to that. How much of that was the upfront work of you really getting to know the organization before you really started writing checks, where you could on $12,000, okay, done.
Yeah. So what happened was with Save Life International, again, the passion of helping women in crisis pregnancy, really meant a lot to me. Yeah. And then what I did was I just went right down the line with people that knew them.
Yeah.
Okay. So as each relationship connected to them, I decided to donate $200. $500 a month, whatever it was.
Right.
And really, it went from open eyes, spreading the gospel through mobile messengers, to Save a Life, helping women in crisis pregnancy, to Generation Distinct, helping young adults find their purpose, to Christians Against Poverty, helping you with your money, to Administer Justice, helping you with legal matters, to Empowered Poor, giving you micro lending, and then to Corporate Chaplains of America, giving you a chaplain in the workplace.
Yeah.
So God just brought this array right there.
Yeah.
So then when I looked at it, I said, this is a portfolio of nonprofits.
Yeah.
So I said to myself, okay, so guys that have money, whatever the case may be, they would probably have a handful they would donate to. They wouldn't donate just one. So they would have a portfolio.
Yeah.
So it kind of made sense.
Yeah,
and that's what I've done.
Yeah.
So it's beautiful.
It's a great giving portfolio, right?
Yeah.
It ties to your values, it ties to your beliefs, it ties to your faith, it links yourself, family, work, and what you've captured in next steps in the book. I feel like we're just getting warmed up here a bit, right?
I'm ready to go now. Let's start going.
Exactly. And we could keep going, but we're going to have to wrap it up here too.
Oh, boy.
So as you step back, and it kind of closing words, I guess, closing words of wisdom, closing words of encouragement, others that are out there. And I'm actually thinking about these different audiences, right? The 25-year-old self that's out there that's just starting, sitting with a banker, trying to figure out how do I learn about financial ratios. The individual then that's got their business in the zone, but they're really trying to figure out how do I manage it? How do I maybe fearfully, but take that step in terms of saying, no, let's go get the business, and now I'm going to put a trailer on site and I'm going to manage it. That's a little bit more, call it mid of career of whatever that could be. And then also those individuals that are in similar situations to yourself. Have a life of abundance. We always talk about the purpose for Clearwater Capital is so that we inspire and empower our clients to live with joy, confidence, and a spirit of abundance. Because it's not about building the biggest pile, right? How do you live joyfully, like you are sharing in terms of how do you give back? Confident, right? That there is fear, so we need to have confidence in terms of how everything works. But then that spirit of abundance to give back. And there's a lot of individuals that are listening that have abundance in this world and that have the opportunity to turn around and serve nonprofits. So those 3 individuals, maybe in the closing words of encouragement, inspiration, challenge, that would be there. What would you say to each of those 3 people? Yeah.
I think whenever I look at the faith, the self, the family, and life's work, and I see a person with a problem, I'll always look at those and analyze them with them. And I can find one of them they're not doing that's making the other ones not do so well. So they could be doing really well in life's work and making a lot of money, they can be doing great in their family, and then they're not taking care of themselves. So their health is failing, and their body temple is not in the best shape it needs to be in. And then I say, well, how's your faith? And they're going, I'm not going there either. So there's a thing called Chinese juggling, which is that act where you put a dish on a stick and you spin it.
Yeah.
So when I take those 4 pillars, I visualize them as 4 dishes on the stick. So what it means is you have to spin them. You have to walk up to faith and self and family and life's work and spin that dish.
Okay.
So I could do a quick assessment with a person in 5 minutes and say, put the dish on the stick for faith, self, family, and life's work, and let me know if it's flat or is it on an angle? Which way is it? Yeah. And I can always say, so they can get their life's work going. I'm working with a guy right now that as his life's work going, he just sold a portion of his business and he got $70 million. He's got his family going. They're all great. He's excessively overweight with diabetes and taking injections every day.
Wow.
And he's big on God. So his wife says to me, can you help him with the diabetes? Now, I practice pretty good eating habits and so on. So I said, yes. So I've been working with him for 3 months. He's lost 50 pounds. And now he's getting himself back. He stopped all injections and all medicine.
Wow.
Just by changing his diet.
Wow.
Right? I go, you have the money, so quit trying to make more money. You got $70 million. Why are you beating this up to get more?
Right.
Don't you see? And you got an injection every day. How can that even make sense to you?
Yeah.
So now all of a sudden he's doing that. So you don't try to balance. There's a word I learned recently. There's a company down in Tennessee, I think it was, called Barnhart Crane Company.
Yep.
And those guys give away, I was down there for a meeting all day. Those guys are going to give away $70 million. They do about $1.2 billion organizationally. Yeah. They're going to give away $70 million this year. That's so exciting. But anyway, so one of the things his wife said.
And for those that are looking for the Alan Barnhart story and the Barnhart Crane and Rigging Company, if you go to the National Christian Foundation website, you'll be able to find some videos and backstory on that. It is a really inspirational family story. Yeah.
And one of the things Alan's wife said, she goes, we're not trying to balance our life. We're trying to integrate things into our life.
Yes.
Wow. That's like a puzzle now.
Yeah.
So you're trying to integrate the pieces into your life where they fit together versus you're always struggling with, do I do this or this?
Yeah.
Quit trying to do this or this. Yeah. Go with
bring it all together.
Bit the puzzle to fit it together.
Yeah.
So I think
otherwise plate's going some plate could fall and break and drop and or like the gentleman you just shared about.
Yeah.
Right?
I think like you said though, at the end of the day, can you integrate the faith, the self, family, and life's work into the integration of your life and bring them kind of all up together? You're not going to win by being a workaholic, being an alcoholic, making a bunch of money, and then trying to fix the other ones later. It's going to be brutal. I've done some of those things, and it's brutal to go back and fix them later.
Yeah.
So if you can somehow bring those 4 up at the same time, respect your maker, take care of your body, love your family, and then enjoy your business with passion. That's the best thing you can possibly do.
And it applies whether you're 25, 50, 75. It applies in terms of that integration.
Yeah.
Tim, thank you so much for joining me today. This conversation, I say it often, right, as we get going in this. Sure. It's almost like I could see a part 2 to all of this. Yeah. But I appreciate your words of wisdom, your life experience, and the difference that you're making in the world, right? And leaving that legacy one day at a time as you write your story too. So Tim, thank you so much. For our listeners, if you want to continue the conversation, please send us an email at clearconversations@ccpwealth.com. Have a blessed day.